Hi, everyone, and a massive welcome to GDG Johannesburg Women Tech Maker event. I hope you guys are ready to have fun and a good evening with us. Thank you for taking the time to spend it with us and listen to what Anissa's got in store. But without further ado, welcome again. Okay, so what is GDG? I'm sure you're wondering. Well, GDG is a wonderful developer user group, and what we do is we create a wonderful ecosystem for developers, new people, old people, where you can learn about Firebase, Android, Flutter, Golang, and so much more. So if you want to know more, come through, come into the space. We are here to learn with you and grow with you as well. Okay, and I am one of the women tech makers of GDG Johannesburg, now that we know what GDG is. So, the Google Women Tech Maker program provides visibility for people that are underrepresented who identify as female. And if you'd love to be a part of a Women Tech Maker and make a difference, definitely try to join the link. There's a link of womentechmaker.com and you can find out more. Okay, and so for this month, this is our first meetup. So we're gonna meet every first Wednesday of the month. You can get in touch and join so that you can get alerts on the GDG community platform. So it's very good to be a part of an ecosystem. We're available on Twitter, we're on Instagram. You can definitely email us as well. And we've got a wonderful code of conduct. So we want to make sure that everybody feels comfortable, everybody's heard, but we take an anti-harassment policy very seriously. So we want to create a space that's very conducive, free of harassment, so we can all have a wonderful experience. So if you come across something where you're feeling uncomfortable or you feel someone is disobeying the code of conduct, sorry, you can definitely holler at us so we can address it so that everybody is having positive vibes. Okay, and well, this event would not have been possible without the wonderful sponsors and the people in the background. I'd like to give a shout out to BBD, Retro Rabbit, Offer Zen, JetBrains, and there's some cool prizes up for grabs. So I'm not going to say much, not yet. I hope you guys are ready. Okay, so if you'd love to be a speaker, even if you're a first time speaker, reach out to us. We'd love to get in touch with you at gdgjohannesburg at gmail. You can also reach out to us on Twitter. Whether you're experienced or you're new, you're welcome to give a talk. And for today's agenda, I'm sure you're wondering what is this lady going on and on about. But for today, I have given you hopefully a warm welcome. And we're gonna allow and give Anissa not only that same wonderful warmth, right? Like even if it's virtually, for us to make space for us. So she's making space for her. So we're gonna listen to her talk from 6 till 6:15. Then after that, we've got survey and goodbye. And in between there, we're going to have prizes up for grabs. So you must stay tuned. Okay. And then, so I am going to give the platform to the wonderful Anissa, but then I'll just do a little intro, right? Okay. I was just making sure the sound is on, but I hope you guys can hear me. Hi, Anissa. You are on mute.
Hello, I didn't want to interrupt you, so I just wait. But
oh, okay.
hello.
Well, I think the feedback is wonderful. You are looking beautiful today, hey?
Thank you. You're sweet.
And I am definitely looking forward to you helping me make space for me. So I can't wait to hear what you've got in store. I'm really excited to hear you talk. And without further ado, the platform is all yours.
One.
Hi, Anissa. You're on mute again. Hello, everyone. It's me,
I'm
Pamela.
so sorry. So I was saying this is a tech space, and I'm not the tech expert, as you can see. So bear with me as I share, but we should be good to go. So there we go, making space for her. So yes, I just wanted to start off by saying hello. And thank you so much for the invitation. It's really, really lovely to be here with you all and to share a little bit about the work that I do and the organization that I just founded called Equal Being. I work in the field of international human rights law, and my area of special interest is on gender equality, hence the title of this presentation, Making Space for Her. Now, it's a subject matter that's really dear and close to my heart, and I've devoted quite a lot of time researching it, and of course I've got lived experiences to draw on. But having said that, I do want to say that a presentation like this can't possibly do justice to a topic such as this, right? So you'll have to forgive the lack of depth and the quick sort of glossing over of concepts and issues, but I hope that at the very least it's a conversation starter. And it elicits some thought going forward. Before I do begin with the substance and why making space for her is something that benefits everyone, I thought it prudent to say this at the onset. Any really good gender conversation or discussion, even reform efforts and policies, they're not about man bashing. And I think it's important that that's clear from the outset, right? This isn't about oppression Olympics to see who fares the worst. It's not about hating on anyone, because really that would make us no better than the oppressors. But rather it's about pinpointing the problem areas and working to find solutions, right? So much like in any working environment, we're looking to solve a problem, and the hope is that everybody's on the same page. And the reason I mention this, and I quite like that the code of conduct was shared earlier on, is because I think it's very counterproductive to enter into conversations like this one with an adversarial or confrontational sort of mind frame. Though women would be forgiven for being incredibly angry at the status quo. But what this conversation does ask of us is that we all sit in the discomfort that will naturally emerge when we engage in these conversations, and to resist defensiveness, right? Defensiveness is a natural human response, and often we have to quiet that part of our being in order to hear different perspectives. And those perspectives could very well enhance the lives of others. So discomfort's a good sign. Let's remember that. It means we're easing out of our comfort zone in order to hopefully make a positive change. So with that in mind, I always think it's useful in any given situation that we reflect and pause on things that are being shared without leaping towards responses. And so what we use at Equal Being is this comma. We say, let's pause, let's take a comma, and let's have a conversation, right? So that everybody's input is heard. So it allows well-considered input when we give thought to things that are being shared, but also allows us an opportunity for that growth and learning that I referred to before. Okay, so now the groundwork has been sort of laid, and I'll get on to the interesting stuff. So Equal Being, that's the name of the organization, was launched on Women's Day in August. And it was born out of a frustration at the status quo around gender inequality. So as I mentioned, I work in law and women's rights, and the frustration around enforcement of rights and accountability is never ending, right? So I'm sure you've noticed that people get away with all sorts of things, and often it leaves women with the short end of the stick. In the context of the law, I realized that as important as law reform is and regulations, they aren't enough on their own, right? These are very important, as are workplace policies around harassment or any policies that look to benefiting the lives of the marginalized. those have an important role to play. And I'm certainly not suggesting that they don't, otherwise I'd be out of a profession. But what I am suggesting is that on its own, it's not enough. And we all need to take responsibility for the state of the world and do our bit, however small that is, to affect the change that's necessary. And for equal being, it's more than a mechanical checklist approach to equality, but a really soulful, considered approach that appreciates the humanity in all. So if we just take a moment to consider our own being, who we are, our essence, not defined by arbitrary and socially imposed distinctions, but really looking inward to our inherent dignity and humanity, it's very hard to argue that any being is superior to another. And yet the way we behave towards one another demonstrates otherwise. Right? So at the core of each and every one of us is a being that's not only deserving of respect and dignity, and I think we can all agree on that, but also has a responsibility to refrain from oppressing others. Right? And yet we find ourselves as oppressors without knowing it. So right now, I'm going to cue in the discomfort. Right? There might be some discomfort happening now at the thought of being part of the problem. But this is what equal beings work all about, creating a greater awareness of the structural confines that we've all been raised in and molded in, right? So these confines teach us biases and harmful culture and behavior. But once this awareness exists, then we can act as conscious contributors to society via the workplace and the families and social settings and the like, so that we can no longer contribute to existing harmful narratives that continue to undermine women, but actively work to shift them. Okay, but what do I mean about this, by this, right? The title of this presentation is Making Space for Her, and I picked it because this is just one example of the consequences of the harmful narratives that remain part of our discourse and reality. And this is the shrinking, of women, the invisibility of women, and the confining of women to particular spaces. In the presentation description, I mentioned that there are benefits to all when we begin to shift our consciousness away from discriminatory ones towards one that engenders the oneness of each being. Now remember, this is oneness, not sameness, and it's something I'll come back to later. But what does it mean to shift this discriminatory framework? Often the movement for gender equality is seen as something that's outside of who we are. It's extrinsic to our own being, right? Something somebody else will do. And the rest of us don't really have any responsibility. So Equal Being aims to bring it closer to home so we can see ourselves as protagonists of change rather than passively waiting for others to bring about change. So once we start viewing humanity as intrinsically equal, then we begin to understand that when a part of the whole is misaligned or harmed, it has implications for the whole, right? So this slide says what lessens one of us, lessens all of us. Now, in any given tech setting, and let's take the tech space as an example, the potential is unknowable because women are still lessened, and that lessens the potential of all. So what has this got to do with making space for women? Well, historically, women were considered the property of men, and this is still true in many respects across the world, even if the same language is not used, right? We either belonged to fathers, to uncles, to brothers, or husbands. And the implications were that women were treated as non-human more often than not. And because we were taught that men were the standard or the default, and again, here's cueing discomfort. This is not a man-bashing exercise against men. It's just the way that the system works, right? That men are the default human. Everything is molded to fit the needs of men to the exclusion of women. And this is what patriarchy is. Another cue for discomfort. When we use that word, perhaps it might make people feel a little bit uncomfortable. But so because women have been excluded, we've been made invisible, undervalued, forced to shrink and to fit into these little established molds that don't really see us or value us. Right, so things have certainly improved from decades ago when women can vote. And we should certainly celebrate like every step towards gender equality, no matter how big or small, but we're so far away from it being a reality, and a reality in every sense of the word. Our bar is just so low. And many of us continue to accept that low bar without a second thought. And we really have to do better than that. And I think we have to be honest about the status quo. And the honesty requires us to see that we need to do better. Our collective potential depends on it. Okay, so now a little bit away from the theory and more to sort of practical examples so that maybe you can see if this resonates a bit more with you. The first example is quite literal. It's manspreading. And I think you may all have a little bit of a chuckle over this, as it may seem quite silly, because in the grand scheme of things, this ranks quite low on the spectrum of harms, right? So what if someone is taking up more space literally? Well, I'd really like you to make a mental note of your reaction to seeing this picture. And at the very end, I'll prompt you to reconsider. Whatever outcome or opinion you have, if you'd like to, I'd encourage you to share them in the comments section. What about this setting, right? This is a common setting, although these days, given that it's COVID, it's not happening as much, but we all know the office setting, the boardroom setting. Note-taking, and these are, again, simple examples, right? You're in a meeting that's male dominant, which is a reality for tech space, for instance, and the meeting requires note-taking. Everyone in that room, presumably, because they have that particular job, brings with them value and expertise. But who is almost always considered to be better at taking minutes? The women. And this, by the way, is called benevolent sexism. And that, in effect, renders women invisible, asking women to take less space in the meeting and to focus on just recording rather than contributing to the substance. What about mansplaining? I'm sure you've all heard this phenomenon where a man will explain to a woman, often the woman has more expertise than the man, and he'll explain something to her in a very condescending way. Or taking credit where it's not due. Again, I'm sure we've all seen this happen, where a woman will share her ideas and then later on it's taken up by a man, and he takes credit for that. What about speaking over and interrupting a woman while she's speaking? Now, if we're alive to this, we start to notice how common it is for men to speak over women. And that's predominantly because a boy has been taught that his words have value, while a girl has been taught that hers have less value and hold less weight. So even in court proceedings, for example, the voice of women often holds less probative value than a man. In some countries, a man has to speak for a woman for that piece of information to be accepted as her version of the events. So we're missing out on the talent of women when they continue to be silenced. And in particularly male-heavy industries, this is even more pronounced. But it's harmless, right? It's harmless to speak over a woman or to interrupt her. Well, no, it's not, because, like I said, it relegates women to the sidelines, makes her invisible and of little value. And that's not just my opinion. This research has shown that in tech companies specifically, 40% of women leave after 10 years, compared to 17% of men. And this is attributed to workplace conditions, undermining behavior from managers, being passed up for promotions, having projects dismissed, feeling stalled in one's career, etc. Right? Naturally, because of institutional bias and sexism, when women are not given their rightful place, they aren't seen and valued. And then the man ends up getting all the promotions, right? So if you don't see something, you don't know that it exists. You don't see the value in it. And if women are sidelined, then this default male that I referred to earlier is constantly being turned to or reverted to over and over. So can we be surprised that when it comes time to find somebody for a particular job role, that we'll look to men? Or when it comes time for a panel of experts to come and talk about a particular topic, that we look to men? If we're trained to see only one reality as real, and that is the male reality, then how can we think beyond our reality? The fact is that's not reality. And we need to really think about reconfiguring what reality means. How many stories have we heard about women who study anything tech related and then who quit because of the behavior of the men in their class, right? So someone passionate leaves the tech industry. And these are stories specific to tech, right? People leaving the tech industry because men are behaving poorly. And what are the implications of that on technological progress? It's huge. It's huge. And if she complains, what value does her complaint hold? Will these school policies that are possibly in place protect her as they should, or will the person implementing them be swayed by his or her own biases against women? So you see where I'm going with this. There's so much harmful culture and behavior that's ingrained that we really have to start thinking consciously about shifting. Now, of course, in some of these examples that I've shared, one can say this happens to men too. And I'm not denying that, of course. I'm sure there are many men who take notes in meetings. But my point here is that the frequency in the case of women is greater. And when it happens to women who have had a history of oppression, the effects differ significantly. And again, one might be inclined to respond by saying, oh, these are all minor. Women need to lighten up and relax, right? No, wrong. These minor things are what the patriarchy is using to minimize women and keep women in a particular place. And it's about silencing the voice and maintaining stereotypes that we as individuals need to start breaking down. I'll just share one example of a post that I saw some years back about a woman who is kept back until 7 p.m. on a Friday night with a 1-year-old baby at home for a meeting with senior male officials to be part of a discussion about the impediments to increasing women's participation in that sector. There were 3 men talking and 5 women taking notes. They didn't see the irony in that. Right? So when I see things like that, I'm thinking to myself, how can there be such a disconnect between one's own individual actions and the problems that person is trying to solve? But we've been taught to do this. It's not questioned, and it's always remaining part of our narrative. And until, again, we work to dismantle those, we will perpetuate them, and then the cycle continues. Okay. So, on to some more examples. What about women in the public space? Where did it go? There we go. Okay. So women in public spaces often get catcalled, right? And in response to that, we either ignore it, or we uncomfortably smile, or we pick up the pace so that we can get out of a potentially dangerous situation. Again, we shrink in order to not ruffle feathers and in order to maintain our own safety and security. If we smile too much, it's an invitation to assault. If we smile too little or not at all, we aren't friendly. And how often have we heard someone tell a woman, well, you should just smile, or why aren't you smiling, right? As though an act of smiling is owed to somebody else. Now, this picture of this woman who looks very free and happy with her headphones on comes with a headline that says, women are told, don't use headphones after sex attacks. Right, so again, it's asking women to shrink, to be seen, made invisible. And by asking women to take off their headphones, it's asking women to be on alert to hear potential predators instead of them being the subject of the conversation, right? These predators are granted the space that women don't have to continue behaving in a criminal manner. So there's a disconnect in all arenas of life, media, the tech, law, everything, right? We say one thing, we mean something else, we do something else. We tell women, alter your behavior of wearing headphones rather than focusing on altering harmful behavior. Right, so these are just a few examples that I wanted to share, and maybe now it will help you reconsider the minorness of manspreading, right? And I thought this comic was a nice way to demonstrate just how unminor this is. It's not minor when you think of everything that women have to endure because the patriarchy silences us. So the bottom line is that harmful norms and culture are perpetuated repeatedly, often without thinking twice. It's ingrained and unconscious in so many cases. And again, many times it's seen as harmless, as minor on the spectrum of harm, right? So if you're thinking of the worst case being gender-based violence and then manspreading, yes, of course, there's a difference, but they're all harmful and they all contribute to silencing women. And saying that women ought not to have a space in society. And the trouble with this is that society's shooting itself in the foot with this type of thinking. And there are countless more examples that I won't get into because it's little time, and this is not meant to be a presentation that provides an exhaustive list of harms that require altering, or even a presentation about manspreading. What I'm trying to do here is to present the tip of the iceberg in relation to harmful culture, norms and behavior, and the impact that it has on societal progress, and to alert everyone to this problematic behavior so that we can collectively begin to think about how to reframe and remold issues on equality between women and men. And so then the question is, why is this beneficial for everyone? So let's look at an analogy of a bird. So this bird represents humanity. One wing represents man, the other represents women, those who identify and are treated as women, as well as those non-binary people who remain oppressed by the patriarchy, despite their desires not to identify as women or men, but are being treated as women. I note this because it's not meant to be an exclusionary analogy, as that would run really counter to what the premise of oneness that I draw on. But my point being with this analogy is that the male wing is stronger in the sense that it has systemic sexism to prop it up, to help it gain strength to fly, to flap rather. The other wing is strong, no doubt about that, but it's held back by other conditions that don't hold the male wing back. It's been injured so frequently that it'll take time for that wing to heal. Again, don't get me wrong, that wing flaps and flaps hard and flaps well, but it's being held back. And unfortunately, the way that the bird thinks is that it only needs to place importance on getting that one wing to fly strong, hoping that that's enough for the bird to take flight. But it isn't. And the bird remains grounded. Now, what this analogy is saying is that the systemic sexism that exists, this patriarchy, is holding all of us back, not just causing harm to women. The patriarchy is harmful to women and to men as a group and to humanity as a collective because the bird always remains grounded. It's incapable of flying. And so unless it flies, the potential is unknowable, right? And why is it harmful to men? Other than the unknowable potential that I referred to? Well, because the patriarchy also places expectations on men and expects conformity with those norms. And any movement away from the stereotypes that men are, they have to assert aggressiveness or, whatever else means that men are not man enough then. And that's incredibly harmful too. So working towards dismantling patriarchy doesn't mean that men are the enemy or that all men should stand guard against women. It means that the system within which we all grow up in is harming all of us, putting labels on us for no good reason and hampering growth. Right? I'll use one more example to demonstrate, and this is a recent article that I came across that says China bans effeminate men from TV as part of cultural crackdown. Right, so this is a pretty obvious way of how it's harmful to men as well. So, understandably, I think people might feel quite overwhelmed by this because there's countless examples, and how can we ever overcome this? It's not a simple solution, but it does start with each of us. Each of us thinking about these minor forms of exclusion that fuel systemic sexism. And how do we know that our behavior might be harmful? Higher equal being, and I'll tell you. No, I'm just kidding. Equal being's anchor is oneness, right? And I referred to it at the very beginning, where I said that, we're all inherently one. We're part of one family. There's no physical characteristics, no societally imposed distinctions, no privilege, no amount of wealth or status that can change that. Because this anchor in our being, it's inalienable, right? It cannot be taken away. And it's based on the common humanity and dignity that we all possess. So the more we move away from this anchor, or treat someone with less dignity as we would ourselves or the people we most love and respect, the more we're falling short of the requirement to behave in accordance with our own humanity, right? Of course, there's more to this, and I'm oversimplifying it for the purposes of this presentation, and the depth comes with more engagement. But I think the point remains that if we think or behave in a way that strays from this anchor, then you need to know that this is a time to pause, right? To take a calmer and to remold and to rethink. Again, it's quite simple, a simple glance over the concept, and there's lots of depth that I can't get into now. But I'm hoping that the message comes across, the message that I intend to share comes across. I do want to add one other thing though, and that's that, when I say equality between women and men, I'm not saying sameness, right? And I think that's probably well accepted everywhere, that equality is not about sameness. And it can't be about sameness, because that would further marginalize women. We are different, and those differences need to be accounted for. And because of that difference, we need to stop looking at the male as a default human, and determining everything in society based on that standard, right? So I'm suggesting that in our treatment of another, our inclusion of others, our acceptance of another, it's based on this inherent inalienable quality. But how we go about living in society has to 100% take into account the differences between women and men in order to get to a place where there's real equality. And just to illustrate, the problem with the sameness approach is that it, again, uses this default male as a standard by which to measure things, and this doesn't work. And I'll show you, I'll explain with an example. If you have medical drug trials, for instance, that are supposed to cure something, and the drugs are only used or only trialed by men, it has huge implications for the efficacy of those drugs in the female anatomy because of difference. And yet often it's considered wasted resources to put the same energy researching the impact of drugs on the female anatomy, because the go-to is the default male. Another example is that of the automobile industry. Cars are tested using male type crash test dummies. So the height, the build, composition of neck muscles, they're all of the masculine norm. Female crash test dummies are used, but in the passenger seat. But mostly, and this is because women are assumed to be passengers most of the time and not drivers. And when the crash test dummy is used, the female one, it's just smaller with no real specifications on the female body, right? So bone density or muscular composition and the like. So what often happens to anything is that, you shrink it and pink it, and that's sufficient for women. And in the context of the motor vehicles, it means that on average, fatalities and accidents are higher for women than they are for men, as are serious injuries. And this is not a fact that's not known. It's widely known by those concerned. Similarly, seatbelts and airbags, they protect men, but can do serious damage to women because tests are conducted on this default male. There are countless more examples, and I'm happy to share the sources of this information with you. But they all point to the same thing, that there's a very, very little space given to women in all domains of life because the narrative of the patriarchy is that women are less valuable. Now, if we consider all beings as one, the research of the drug trials, for instance, would include women and our realities, and the narrative that exists that women belong in the periphery begins to change into one that views women as inherently significant and worthy of the same time and value that's afforded to men. So as you can imagine, I could talk about this for hours and hours, but I'll stop here because if there's space, I'm keen for a conversation through comments. But I'll add one more thing before I stop, and it's to say that this is why Equal Being came about, and that's to raise awareness about these issues so that we can begin constructing or considering how to remold a new narrative. Right? This doesn't mean that women need to fit into a male-dominated world and that it solves the problems. We need to think about molding something completely different because the current system works on the fallacy of inferiority. If we value the humanity in all, we're no longer silencing and ignoring women or any other groups for that matter, and we make space for her. And whether we like it or not, that space is opening up slowly but surely. The World Economic Forum, for instance, estimates that at the current rate of progress, it will take 267 years, 267.6 years to be exact, to close the economic gender gap. That's just the economic gender gap. Now, it would speed things up significantly if everyone were to get on board. And I thought it would be nice to end with this. It says, if not us, then who? If not now, then when? And there's a way for each of us individually and collectively to work towards making those shifts and to remolding our framework. And as an end, I'll just do a shameless marketing plug and say that if any of this resonated and you want to explore this more, perhaps you think it's something that your company might like to explore in a really meaningful way and not just in a checkbox manner, then I'd encourage you to reach out to me. My details are on the screen now. And I'm also really keen to chat to anybody who wants to share experiences or speak more about this issue. No strings attached. I'm genuinely interested in gender equality. And I'm keen to collaborate with anybody who's interested. So please reach out. And that's it. Thank you so much. I'll hand back to Vuyo. But I think if there are any questions or comments, if there's time for that, Vuyo, I'll leave that to your discretion.
I think we've got a lot of time. Like I was just out here living in the YouTube comments and just really, I am blown away. I really enjoyed this talk and it covered so many points that when I look at my child, for example, he's a boy and it comes innate where I teach him to be fearless, but then even the young girls that are around him, I tell them, you also need to be just as fearless, So I feel like it also starts at such a young age that we are the ones like, no, you must always be clean. But if a boy plays around and he gets dirty, it's okay, So I want the girl to get dirty too, and
Yes.
find their own path. And if they want to be dainty and however, that's also cool,
Yes,
and if the
absolutely.
boy chooses to be that way as well. So I really enjoyed this topic. But the comments, like I'm living in the comments. Like there's one lady, literally, she was just sharing her experience in high school where she asked her mom to get a new pair of headsets, and so that she can pretend that she can't hear the guys that are catcalling her. And
Oh,
yeah, I think I'm the inverse. I will catcall the guy. I'm like, yay, this is what it's like. And it's such a sad experience.
yeah, absolutely. It really, truly is. And the thing is, we've all had to learn some sort of survival mechanism. And I was just driving home the other night and I saw two guys. They weren't together, but on either side of the road jogging, and it was dark. I thought to myself, wow, what a privilege, to be able to jog at night without even thinking twice that you're going to be hassled. Yes, you might be, robbed or something, but your body is not at risk in the same way that a woman's body is. So, yeah.
100%. So we've got a couple of questions.
Mhm.
I will ask my question afterwards. Okay, so the first one is from Safi. I hope I'm saying it correct. Thanks for the talk, very relatable. Any tips on how to kick off a calmative? Okay, now the English data
Conversation.
bundles.
No, that's a word I made up. It's a
Okay,
conversation.
okay. I'm like, no, like the English is escaping. Okay, about this topic within a male-dominated leadership team. So, what are your
Mm.
tips maybe on how to kick that off?
Yeah, it's not easy. Look, I think it takes a lot of bravery to do that. But I think that for me, the starting point might be that we call things out, and not in not in a confrontational sort of manner. And if that's your way to do it, then that's your way. I'm not also going to judge women who have bursts of anger about certain things. But if we're looking at having a conversation, I think calling things out, being like, you know what, I don't think that the treatment of women in XYZ is correct, and can we really unpack this and discuss it a little bit? And look, at the end of the day, I think that it boils down a lot to the receptivity of the leadership team and whether or not they're interested in that sort of thing. And that's something that I'm hoping to, as equal being, to work on. But I think it's just about calling things out whenever they appear, so that people are aware of it. Because, like I said, it's quite ingrained in the way that we
Mm.
function as society, that often people don't even see the problem. Um,
It's
but it
swept
does
under the
require
rug a lot,
bravery. Yes.
without a
Yeah,
doubt. Yes. So,
for
next
sure.
question. We have a lot. Okay. Um, okay, I'm just gonna check via. Okay, oh, there we go. So we've got Boitepo, and she's saying, thank you for the session, Anissa. These conversations are needed to be engaged with in especially the tech space. That's very true. And I think it's very
Absolutely.
nice, like a panel. We discussed this a bit earlier, where you open up the platform to get those different views. But we understand the situation. And then the next one is we have Jessica. And then she says, I hope I can refer to her as she, sorry. Okay, they say, I had a lecturer who blatantly ignored any girls who asked questions and stated that we should use our brains. And as soon as a guy asked a question, he would openly answer it. Oh, hectic,
Oh.
hectic. Mm,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, gosh, yeah, I don't really know what to say except that that sort of
Mm,
thing makes my blood boil somewhat.
mm. And I feel like it
That's
makes
the
me even
reality.
more outspoken. I'm like, I'm already outspoken. Now you will. Yeah. So the next one
Yeah.
is from sure, Askis. Nsovo. Yes, true. We all had to learn a survival mechanism. I feel it is sad that we had to grow thick skin. That's true. Guys don't have to go through the
Mm,
same challenges. As you were mentioning before, they could jog freely. And even with us, when you wear something, is it too tight? It's too loose. You're not comfortable. Like,
yeah,
yeah, it's just something
exactly.
else.
There's judgment every
A
step
lot,
of the
a
way.
lot, a
Mhm.
lot of it. I had to literally tell my female cousin that you need to understand where you live as well, what you can and cannot wear. You're not at the beach. You might get attacked. So it's all these things.
Yeah,
And
and it's actually
whereas,
infuriating. Why should sorry to interrupt you. See, it's
no,
ingrained.
no,
Um, we I even forgot what I was going to say now. But yeah, I mean, it's infuriating that we even have to think about these things.
Mm,
We should be free, you know.
yes, like
A
it.
smile is not an invitation, and neither is my dress code, you know. Um,
And then we have Tamishni saying once she got a high mark, she got the highest mark in the class for a programming module, and her lecturer automatically assumed that they were male and called out the name in class. Like when they
mhm.
were calling the name out, they were like, Mr. So and so got the highest mark.
Yeah,
And you're like,
yeah,
it's like fault, but
yeah,
okay. That's
yeah. It's
crazy
this
because
ingrained bias. Yeah,
that guys are
only.
smarter. It's really
Yeah,
my blood is now boiling because coming from Wheaton Code, we were just like it
yeah.
was 200 people, 30 ladies only, 30,
Cheapest.
and it's like it's just guys, and then you're
Yeah.
constantly having to prove yourself that you know what I
Mm.
know what I'm saying, because we already have our own self doubt. So I had my own self doubt. Kone says when women speak out about inequalities, they are seen as angry or too woke. That is true. Yeah, that
Of
is
course,
true.
women are angry. What kind of a comment? You know, like when like I get what you're saying, and yeah, of course they're angry. Of course they
Mm,
work. You know, because our
mm,
lives have asked us to be work. Um,
mm.
but yeah,
And just
it's
having to constantly say that hey I'm here, hear me, see me,
yeah.
or recognize
Hmm.
the value that I bring to the table.
Yeah.
And it's like the nice thing or the thing that I love the most about women is that we bring a different dynamic. The next question, um, okay, so we have like 3 minutes.
Oh,
um, okay, pen, there we go. um, Nolonwabo is saying, look now how few women in the tech industry. Okay, there are few women in the tech industry. They always feel like we're not good enough. That's true.
yeah,
But I think this platform opens up the space to say, you know what, you are good enough. You don't need to be
absolutely.
100% sure to get in. I can't tell you how many ladies I've told that you don't need to be 100% qualified for this position. Shoot your shot. That's what guys do. Like even if they don't know
Exactly.
something, they
Yes.
pretend like they know.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
just like, do you know what you're saying? Like, yeah, crazy.
And they're
So
so confident too.
and that's the thing that sells it. The confidence
Yes.
that they have
Yeah.
in themselves, even though they don't know the job. With
Hmm.
us, we need to be 100% sure. Are you sure this is right? Are you sure? Sure. Before you
Hmm.
even say, like, okay, I think the answer is this. Like,
Ooh.
what if they laugh at
Yeah.
me? What if I get it wrong? Guys, just shrug it off. If it's wrong, oh, okay, let's keep it
Strong.
moving.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
then the
Yeah.
next comments is from Nomana. She says, it seems like the word feminist has been tainted and it's not about wanting equality in terms of being a person who deserves equal respect. How can how can I make men aware of this issue and actually be heard?
Mm.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that is a good one. I think it's quite interesting how tainted the word feminist has become. And actually, you know, feminist is just somebody who believes in the equality of women and men. So it's almost seen as this dirty word that it shouldn't be
Mm,
like that. But you know, for me, it always goes back to this idea of who we are as beings, right? And obviously, it's going to be harder to convince some than others. Um, but but the rights of each human being to equal dignity and respect, it's
mm,
something that
mm,
it's part of our of who we are. Um,
mm,
and so, you know, having maybe this conversation at that level where we're talking about, well, look, there's nothing about me as a woman that makes me less than you
Mm,
as a man,
mm,
you know.
mm.
And I say this with caution because there are people who are in situations that are not particularly safe. And so when you make these sorts of comments and suggestions, it can be it can place one in a difficult situation and sometimes even
That's
dangerous.
true.
So I think
That's true.
it's important to always be cautious. You're not
Mm.
going to tell your partner who possibly beats you frequently that
Really? You're gonna get another
I'm
beating.
equal.
Yeah, no.
So
Like I think I
I'm
hear
very
you.
cautious
Yeah,
about saying women, be outspoken because that has
yeah,
implications also for the safety of
that's true. That's
um,
true.
but I think
Mm,
where the situation is safe, I think again, we
mm,
can only what we can do is we can raise awareness, but
mm,
whether or not it's actually heard is a different story. And because
mm,
I said in the beginning that this is really sort of touching the surface, it needs
mm,
ongoing thing, and it's not a checkbox
mm.
thing. So
That's
it needs
100% right.
ongoing work.
Mm.
So it's not going to be just an easy solution.
I'd love to carry on the conversation. Thank you as well for this wonderful session. Like it's so like it's a living organism, and it's
Mhm.
something that needs to carry on. The comments are booming. Like we will not end the session on time at this rate. But I'd love to say a massive, massive thank you so much, Anissa. Like this needs to like I feel like we need another session. When we literally open up this platform because it's so much. We've got so many experiences that we encounter as women and as people who
Mhm.
identify as female, and even having the male perspective heard as well. That's something we'll definitely
Absolutely,
need, and
absolutely.
to
Yeah,
to actually see what is happening in the tech space. You say, okay, this is what the workspace is like. So I think it's also understanding what the hiring process is like. What are they doing as a company to hire more women? How are you making it inclusive? Because I'm a mom, I have this and that
exactly.
and that and that to do, but does it make me less of a developer? You know?
Yes, and we
Mm.
need male allies. We really do.
Without a doubt, without a doubt. And we're not trying to fight each other here. We're just trying
Mm-mm.
to be heard. Hear us and see us.
Exactly. Yes.
But thank you so much, Anissa. Like I really enjoyed
A
the session.
pleasure.
I
Thank you so
literally
much for
posted
having
some
me.
on Twitter. So please check
Okay.
out your Twitter. And for the people that are on Twitter, check it out as well. I'd love to keep the conversation going. And just reading your comments, it's really insightful. So thank you a million for being such a wonderful
Pleasure.
speaker.
Thank you for
Okay,
having me.
it's an absolute pleasure. We're gonna have you again.
Mm. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, bye. Okay, so just to wrap up the evening, we obviously had a wonderful session with Anissa talking about making space for her, and we understand the importance of it. So now, moving over to the cool stuff, right? We've got DevFest 2021 coming up. I hope you guys are excited. So DevFest is a platform where you can learn about all these wonderful new technologies. You can scoot over, it's okay. Where you can learn about what's happening in the tech space, what's happening with Google, what new features they have. So we're giving that platform, and it'll be happening on the 12th of November on a Friday. So the nice thing is it's like attending a virtual tech event. So now you're in the tech space, you can have a day off. This is important for me to obviously improve in the work that I'm doing, right? So you can definitely talk with your companies, or if you're self-employed or a student, you can take a day off and tune in with us online. And if you can't skip work, it's okay, it's okay. You can have us running in the background, right? The event is absolutely free. You can RSVP over there. So here's an opportunity to take a screenshot, write down the link, copy the link. I'm not sure if the link is in the comments, but then I'll try to copy and paste the link so you guys can just click on it and RSVP. And the next slide. So we would love to applaud you guys and appeal to your better nature. If you'd love to give a talk, we're going to have wonderful sessions from mobile, web, cloud, and beyond. Me, I'm a cloud person personally. But we're going to have these sessions available for you guys to submit your papers from the 6th till the 30th of September. New speakers are absolutely welcome. If you can check on YouTube as well, our previous events when it comes to Deaf Fest and even the Google ones, they're really, really awesome. So you'll leave there having learned so much. So yeah, first time speakers are absolutely welcome. So you can click on the link as well and take a picture of the QR code. Okay. And then, oof, if you like freebies, like I like freebies, guys. Me, I'm like, yeah, freebies galore. So we have awesome swag up for grabs. I'm not gonna tell you what the swag is, but I'll tell you that it's nice and that I have maybe like 40 free t-shirts for 0 years. Yes, we like freebies. Subtle brag. So you can take a Snapchat, fill out the type form, and then you will stand a chance to win some offers in swag. Up next, we also have a survey. So we'd love to get your feedback, guys, so that we know where to improve, what to do better, what you liked. Please, please, please fill out the survey so that we as a GDG also grow, right? As women tech makers, we grow. Constructive criticism, highly appreciated. So take a snap as well. And then the last part, the sad part. I feel like time just flew by. I just, yeah, we took that screenshot fast. Okay, the next slide is that I want to say thank you so much. Like, yeah, thank you a lot for taking the time out of your day, out of your Wednesday afternoon and spending it with us, learning with Anissa. Like, I really enjoyed the session with you guys, even though I can't see you and I'm all alone, but like, just say hi in the comments. Let's keep the conversation going on Twitter. Thank you, thank you, thank you, and see you next time. Bye.